WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
From WCCO Television, the Northwest's leading news station, this is the 6 p.m. report.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. In the news tonight, tragedy at a fire in Stillwater last night. 2 volunteer firefighters died fighting the blaze, and we'll have that story in just a few moments. But first, the story that's been affecting all of us the past couple of days. Let's get an update now on the most powerful winter storm to hit our area in some years.
Well, to start with, on Wednesday, 3 all-time snowfall records collapsed when the Twin Cities were blanketed with 17.1 inches. But tonight, there are new records to tell you about. The snowstorm, which brought our state to a halt yesterday and continues to cause havoc for travelers, actually set a new all-time snowfall record for a 24-hour period, 18.5 inches. Our live eye is showing us just what all of us have been seeing outside our windows today, piles and piles of snow. And with this volume of snow, a snow emergency is in effect in both cities. In St. Paul, residents are being asked not to park on north-south streets. The plows have already been out all day there. Tomorrow, east-west streets in St. Paul will be cleared, so be sure to move your car. Minneapolis plows are on a different schedule. They'll be on east-west streets tomorrow morning. North-south streets will be plowed Monday in Minneapolis. And all of this comes at a time when conditions are actually slowly improving, right?
From what to what, I guess?
From worse to not so bad.
Not so bad. Well, we'll talk about the next snowstorm coming in tomorrow night later. But it's now at least safe to look at the radar. Voila, lo and behold, if we look at our own Twin Cities radar live, well, if you did look at it live, you would see that there it is. There's nothing on it. How do you like that? Good. If we look at the satellite photograph, we will also see that there's really nothing but cold air settling in over the upper Midwest. However, see that little blob out there? That could be a light dusting of snow tomorrow night or Monday,
no.
just to top it off. To show you how this month is rated against some other months, January 82 has already had 44.1 inches of snow. Now, I have news for you. The formerly snowiest month ever was March 1951 with 40 inches. So we have left that record in the dust, and there is more on the way. Why not? Let's go for 50.
Go for it. Go all the way.
Yeah, but at least tomorrow should be a fairly decent day and give us a chance to dig out.
Well, the improving conditions are no doubt encouraging news to all of the people who have been snowbound for a couple of days, Mike.
And most Minnesotans stayed out of trouble by staying home, out of choice or out of necessity. Those who did venture out did so at the risk of becoming stuck on the snow-blown highways. Alan Cox spent most of the day flying over the snow-bound portions of the area, and he's with us now to tell us what he saw. Alan?
Mike, it was definitely better to be over the snow than to be on the roads that were covered with the snow. Of course, the problem was not so severe in the metropolitan area on the freeways and main roads, but just a few miles south or west of the metropolitan area, a different story. For most of the day, Interstate 35 from Faribault south was impassable, shut down by drifting snow that no fleet of plows could hope to control. These are scenes from late this afternoon north of the barricades at Faribault. The interstate highway resembled a small country road. Unfortunately, it carried much more traffic. Some had the muscle power to push, some had to stay in place. At one point this afternoon, the Iowa State Patrol was complaining about the traffic being allowed south from Minnesota. The Minnesota State Patrol said a lot of drivers were simply veering past the barricades. No count yet from state troopers on how many people are stranded on I-35 tonight. Many of them pulled off the road at Faribault early this morning. Other highways in the southern part of the state appeared more lightly traveled, some drivers adopting the British style of driving. They drove on the left side of the road to avoid deep drifts. Cars were scattered along the median of Highway 52 north of Rochester, snow near their roofs. Side roads were deceptive. The smooth surface hid deep piles of snow that ensnared cars and trucks. But for every scene like this, we saw several farms and homes where the snow was undisturbed, and people apparently were remaining inside. These scenes from photographer Bob Mannery and pilot Dale Dobish. 2 points, as obvious from those scenes, I-35 is completely closed from Faribault south. And also, we could see the roofs of homes. It's a little difficult to tell from 700 feet up, Mike, but it appears a lot of people may be having problems with the snow blocking the vents on the top of their homes from the heating, and there is a danger, of course, of carbon monoxide buildup in a very dangerous situation, so it's important to keep the roofs clean.
All right. Observant. Thank you, Alan. In the Twin Cities metropolitan area, things have loosened up just a bit. We're not quite as snowbound tonight as last night. At least we've got most of the buses rolling. In fact, all buses were running today, except the Project Mobility ones. Those provide door-to-door service for handicapped people. MTC officials say the biggest problems they are having concern stalled and stranded cars on the bus routes. Otherwise, MTC says, yes, things are running smoothly tonight. As you know, there was no mail delivery today, but the mail sorters were working downtown. They spent the day at the post office headquarters, so that delivery should be back to normal on Monday. And at this point, the Postal Service says, yes, there will be home delivery come Monday. A lot of people who couldn't get home last night had to work a double shift to fill in for those people who couldn't get from home to work. Jim Newman reports on the double shifts in local hospitals.
Hospitals can't shut down. With that option out, the alternative is overtime for everybody. Here at Abbott Northwestern, where 74 essential staffers were stranded at home by the storm, double shifts make up the manpower. 60 or so nurses and paramedical personnel are living at the hospital. They have had to rotate 2 shifts in 24 hours with an 8-hour break. They live in circumstances you might expect under siege from a storm. The hospital auditorium is a makeshift barracks. Here the remains of last night's dinner, piles of sandwiches, go rancid in the bin. No one has had the time to take them away. The big room is strewn with uncomfortable cots. The mattresses are thin, the springs sag. The nurses say the only real ordeal in all the overtime is trying to get some sleep.
The beds are very uncomfortable. My back is quite sore, but it was a place to sleep. I did get a few hours of sleep. There were people coming in and out different times of night, and some people were snoring, and so it was hard to really sleep.
But in the critical care ward, there is no time for sleep. 2 nurses here were up all night working 3 shifts without sleep. Lorraine Hansen monitors vital signs for intensive care patients. Beth Rajasic does the same. It was a heavy responsibility for the 2, but there were no problems last night. It seems you can sacrifice sleep when you have to.
I feel physically tired, but not mentally. My body is telling me I'm tired, but my mind is still saying go.
Abbott Northwestern Hospital administrators say operating in a snowstorm situation is an expensive proposition. All the overtime means time and a half for everybody. Jim Newman, WCCO Television News, South Minneapolis.
Probably the most overworked people in the state right now are the snowplow drivers. They did have a chance to plow some county roads, but officials from rural and outstate areas are warning people not to drive. There still is drifting snow and low visibility. And the township roads haven't been touched by the plows, so they are absolutely impassable. County officials are telling us most people are remaining inside and not taking chances. And in those areas, there aren't too many places to go because activities, of course, have mostly been canceled. But just because we've got terrible weather doesn't mean everything's been canceled. Karen Boros took a look around town today and found some people who refuse to be prisoners of the weather.
All Ramsey County ice hockey arenas are closed today. In Big Lake, Minnesota, American Legion activities are canceled for today.
Minnesotans are secretly embarrassed by all those cancellations because we not so secretly believe we're made of pretty stern stuff. Not everyone canceled their plans because of the blizzard. Meet R.D. Oslin. He runs. He runs carrying a 50-pound weight, wearing a 35-pound weight belt with 7 pounds worth of boots. He runs up and down 8 stories 7 times, does 6 laps, and then repeats it. After that, he finishes his workout in the weight room.
It's just something that you can't quit. Once you get started, that's my... I've never tasted any kind of alcoholic beverage. I've never tasted coffee. That's my high. That's what I do. I run marathons. Is what that's my secondary, and it's just it's a natural high. You can't explain it, but you can't cheat on it either.
John Anderson. John lives 1.5 miles from work, which he says is too close to justify taking the bus, too far to walk. So John rides, which can be tricky.
I'll swing around a corner and my wheels will go right out from under me sometimes. So I kind of keep a leg free so that I don't go down.
Gail Ashwag and Michael Greigar. When you sign up to get married at Holy Cross Church in northeast Minneapolis, you get married. Gail and Mike invited about 200 people. They got about half that, but the wedding went on as scheduled.
I was hoping it'd get better, but we watched it yesterday and thought we might have to call it off. But we thought about all the reception plans and everything, and we just didn't want to do it. We just crossed our fingers and hoped that everybody would show up.
One of the interesting things about being a reporter is that when the wind howls and the temperature dives and only a fool would venture out, we venture out and tell you how smart you were to stay inside. It's a strange way to earn a living. But I'm not the only fool on this team. With photographer Gordy Leach, Karen Boris, WCCO Television News, Minneapolis.
Two firefighters died and a third remains hospitalized following a fire in downtown Stillwater last night. 34-year-old Bruce Rayburn and 44-year-old Robert Hayes perished while fighting the blaze at Brine's Meat Market, which is a local landmark. Dave Nimmer has more.
The fire broke out between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the meat market portion of the building. It spread quickly to the second-floor restaurant and to the adjacent clothing store. The cold temperatures and blowing winds hampered the firefighters.
Your equipment is being used at its maximum, iced and masked, freezing up. It's just hard all the way around. Your training is never in these type of conditions.
To get at the blaze, firemen had moved up to the roof of the clothing store. All three were up here when the whole structure suddenly seemed to collapse, the supporting timbers weakened by the fire. And all three tumbled into the blaze below and were almost instantly covered by debris. Two of the three perished, and it was an hour or more before their bodies could be located and removed. The cries of the third, Kevin Charleston, were heard by his colleagues, who pulled him to safety. He's now in the burn unit at St. Paul Ramsey Hospital in serious condition. This morning began the business of sorting through the debris and boarding up the buildings.
Well, a lot of work down the drain, but we're not done. We'll try and salvage it and continue on with something.
As yet, there are no official loss figures or cause for the fire, but it was reported to have started in the rear of the building, where the equipment was to smoke meats and fish. With photographers Judd Williams and Bill Kemplin, Dave Nimmer, WCCO Television News in Stillwater.
Convicted murderer Joseph Toure remains in fair condition tonight at St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center from injuries he suffered in a beating at Stillwater Prison last week. Next week, Toure will be operated on for a broken nose and a fractured jaw. He also suffered a fractured skull when other inmates beat him up. Prison officials are investigating the incident. Joseph Toure, of course, convicted in the rape and the stabbing death of 19-year-old Diane Edwards of West St. Paul. Dr. Walt Lyons will have a weather update for us in just a minute when this edition of the 6 p.m. report resumes. Stay with us.
You ever been knocked unconscious and you wake up and you sort of have a dazed look?
Not recently.
No, but I tell you, that's pretty much what a lot of meteorologists asked this weekend. The basic question is, what happened? I mean, records are made to be broken, but they are supposed to last more than 48 hours. This is probably one of the most bizarre things I can ever remember in the history of weather. Yes, the 24-hour record of 17.1 inches said Wednesday was eclipsed by 18.5. But we don't stop there, do we? No. The greatest snow in a single snowstorm, well, we didn't make 20 inches. 19.9. But we keep on going with the records. As we mentioned, it's also the snowiest month ever, but this is the most snow ever measured on the ground at 38.2 inches. There's been a lot of compression. That's how much was left after all that.
We're making
flaking.
history.
We're making history. Whoopee. And more importantly, if you go out and look on your roof, if you have supposed to be 1,000 square feet of roof, you have about 3 tons of snow on it just from the last snowstorm. I don't even know what's left over from the ones before that. Gives you some idea how heavy our light, fluffy snow was. So that was that. And just to make you feel better, to put this into some kind of perspective, these were not all-time records. Like if you want to know the greatest 24-hour snowfall record in the U.S. of A., you have to go out to a little town called Silver Lake, Colorado, where they managed to have a relatively impressive 76 inches. All right. And how much snow can you have in a month? This place in California up in the Sierras, they had 390 inches a month during January of 1911 in Tamarack, California. So, see, it could be worse.
That's obscene.
And if it is, I'm leaving. I mean, as far as around here, though, some of the statistics, let's take a look at them. 15. Hey, that's kind of warm. That was our high, and our lows even above zero. See, there is some bright news. The sun's setting later every day, 5:08. As far as the current conditions, however, you will see there is something rather arctic beginning to appear. We have temperatures generally beginning to slide. The winds are still from the northwest. Temperatures are going to go below zero tonight. and it's going to be basically unpleasant. Whoops, yep, see, new low temperature right there. 3 degrees, northwest wind still at 22 miles an hour, causing blowing and drifting. 37 below the, well, it's warmer than it was last week on the wind chill meter, but it's still, there's a potential for frostbite. The barometer's low, but rising rapidly as the cold, heavy air swings in from the north. As far as the current temperatures, you can see up to the north, it's well below zero around Alex, -10, -24 in the Williston area, and that's what's coming right at us. Wind gusts down a little bit, but you can see in southern Iowa and Wisconsin, 45 miles an hour. They're running 25 to 38 miles an hour over Minnesota. Not quite good enough to be a blizzard, but the distinction is really very minor at this point. The wind chills are down in the serious range. Anything lower than -20, there's a potential for frostbite. Less than -50, you have extreme danger of frostbite if you're outside without proper protection. And you can see that's pretty common over much of the 5-state region. Well, the great question in the last 24 hours, where would the low go? Well, it went right through Waterloo, La Crosse, and off into Lake Superior, and as expected, just north of the storm track is the worst place to be. It came just close enough so we didn't get into the very strong winds, which prevented some of the blowing and drifting. But if you watch this storm, it was a Lulu. It even had some strange weather down south. For instance, Kansas City, they first started with freezing rain, and they went up to 52, then they went back down to 5 degrees. Weird. And look at the way the warm air was bringing north in today's lows, and the cold air, 20 below, is coming into the western Dakotas. You can just see that great spiral of warmth and cold swirling off into Canada. Impressive, isn't it? As far as the radar, I want to show you something different. Snow ending instead of beginning. This is from about 3 a.m. to around 8 o'clock this morning. The snow just went away, disappeared, the skies cleared, and we all went out and started shoveling. As far as the storm totals, bullseye right there. We had more snow than anyone at 19.9, but you can see a foot or more up around Fargo. They had their second greatest storm ever, at 12 inches or more over much of the 5-state region. Only southern Iowa and western South Dakota escaped. The amount of snow on the ground, we're now measuring it in feet. 38 inches here in the Twin Cities has set a record. That's the same at Duluth and International Falls. What worries me is it's going to have to melt one of these days, and the people at the Flood Forecast Center may have a very busy spring. Oh, yeah, only 1 inch at Rapid City. Get your heart out. Well, everyone's watching the big storm that's moving up to the northwest, but I'm going to look in the other direction. Here comes another wrinkle. This is riding along the edge of the cold air, the old Alberta Clipper situation. But look at that satellite picture. High clouds with snow already developing in Montana. Now, let's forget about that storm, which is spiraling off into Canada. Let's look at the jet stream winds. They're going to take these clouds and that light snow and move it right into the 5-state region beginning sometime late tomorrow. So we should be seeing light snow moving in on radar by sometime tomorrow evening or tomorrow night. 1 to 2 to 3 inches of light snow possible by that system tomorrow night and Monday. Lows tonight, down there 20, 30 below northern Minnesota, about 10 below. It will be typical locally. Highs tomorrow just about barely up to 0. Only southwestern South Dakota will make it into the 20s. Traveler's advisory for much of Minnesota, but there's still a blizzard warning out for southwestern and southern Minnesota due to those 30 and 40 mile an hour wind gusts. As far as the forecast, mostly fair if that helps. Colder, travel advisory continuing. It's not that good outside of the cities where you have less effect of those wind gusts, which will stay up to 25 miles an hour. 5 to 12 below the range and lows, 25 to 45 below the wind chills, and that is cold. As far as tomorrow, increasing cloudiness, cold, high, only about nothing. Northwest winds dying down a little bit, 10 to 15, but that chance of light snow right tomorrow night. And look at the week ahead. Better yet, don't look at the week ahead if you can't take anymore, because off and on light snow and below normal temperatures seem to be what we are in for. And I would just like to give my congratulations and thanks to the paramedics, the fire people, the people, and the road crews have done a bang-up job of keeping our cities functioning.
Kept things going. The improving weather conditions have cleared things up a bit at Twin City International Airport. Yesterday, people were stranded when flights were canceled or delayed, but today the airport operated smoothly. The plows kept the runways clear of blowing and drifting snow. The tower reports no delays in takeoffs or landings, but some airlines have canceled some flights to places where the weather is just as bad. Those cancellations have left a few people stranded. Airport police say last night quite a few people spent the night at the airport. There are only a few buses running out of the Minneapolis Greyhound bus depot. The last bus to Duluth left before 2 o'clock this afternoon, and there is only limited service to Chicago and Fargo. Greyhound officials are providing food and shelter for the 30 or so people who are still stranded at the depot. Jefferson Lines has suspended all bus service, at least until tomorrow morning. And the weather didn't stop people from going shopping this afternoon. Some area shopping malls reopened at noon, but not all the stores were open, and business was good at the larger ones. The JCPenney store at Ridgedale reports snow blowers and shovels were the hot items today. They had sold almost their entire stock of snow blowers by just 2 o'clock this afternoon. The merchant said many people weren't buying, but were just trying to get out of the house for a while. Well, enough about the weather. On to a different subject with Tom Hanneman in sports right after this.
Yes, the weather affects the sports as well.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Changes in schedules.
That's right. Some cancellations as well, including the Gopher Iowa wrestling meet, which was canceled. Iowa #1 in the country. And the Wilmer-Hibbing high school basketball game, which was to be a preliminary to tonight's Gopher Illinois basketball game, has also been called off. But the Gopher Illinois basketball game will go on as scheduled, 8 o'clock tonight at Williams Arena. Well, meanwhile, the Gophers' next opponent, Northwestern, is turning into one of the better rags to riches stories in the Big Ten. Even though they lost to Ohio State 59-57 in double overtime today, the Wildcats made a fight of it. The conference doormat for the past 5 years gave the Buckeyes a tough time in Columbus. Jim Stack's bucket brought them back from a 14-point deficit. However, in the second overtime, freshman Troy Taylor tied the game at 57 on a jumper. The Buckeyes had the ball again in the final seconds when Granville Waiters got the shot off before the buzzer. It bounced up, as you'll see in a moment, and then in, giving OSU the win as time ran out. Northwestern also lost to Iowa in the final seconds Thursday night. The Buckeyes win by 2 over the Wildcats. Terry Cummings led the fourth-ranked DePaul past Alabama Birmingham 79-68 at the Rosemont Arena outside Chicago this afternoon. The 6'9" junior was devastating under the boards, grabbing 19 rebounds. With his great height and leaping ability, Cummings' jumper is unstoppable when he's on. He led DePaul with 24 points. This was the Blue Demons' 11th straight win, lifting their record to 16-1. Alabama Birmingham is only in their 4th year of existence in terms of the basketball program, yet head coach Gene Bartow has put together one of the finest programs in the country. The Gopher women's basketball team scored a 63-60 win over Wisconsin this afternoon at Williams Arena. Gophers led by 6 at half, but fell behind by 5 with 7 minutes left to play. 4 Gophers hit double figures today. Laura Conan led the way with 17 points. Debbie Hunter had 16. Marty Dowland and Christine Durant each added a dozen points. The win was the Gophers' 3rd straight, and it raises their overall record to 8-4. Gophers host Iowa next this Monday night at Williams Arena. In other major college basketball games today, an upset as Virginia Tech beats 17th-ranked Louisville by 2. Arkansas edged Houston by 1. Alabama over Florida. Iowa routed Michigan 56-38, and as we showed you, Ohio State by 2 over Northwestern in 2 overtimes. Well, the San Francisco 49ers remain a slight favorite over Cincinnati in tomorrow's Super Bowl in Pontiac, Michigan. The big question for the 49ers is in the game right now is whether wide receiver Freddie Solomon, who sprained his knee in practice this week, will play. San Francisco's deep threat talked about his status for the game today.
Well, I worked out yesterday to test the leg, and it was positive, and today it was hurting a little more than normal, so I didn't work out. Right now, it's swollen a little bit, but this is the Super Bowl and the World's Championship, and hey, I'm going to have to suit up and play.
Well, as you can see, Solomon was still limping at practice today. A final decision on his ability to play will be reached before tomorrow's game. Incidentally, kickoff for Super Bowl 16 is 3 o'clock tomorrow here on Channel 4. The North Stars host the Blackhawks tonight, 8 o'clock at the Sports Center. There was some concern last night that Chicago might not be able to make it into the Twin Cities for this game, but the Blackhawks flew in from Winnipeg this morning. Glenn Sonmore will return to the bench tonight after his stay in the press box. Tonight's game is a sellout. The Gopher hockey team will also be in action tonight. The Gophers will conclude their series with North Dakota in Grand Forks. The Fighting Sioux beat Minnesota 3-1 last night. Ray Boom Boom Mancini successfully defended his North American Boxing Federation lightweight title in Atlantic City today with a 10th round TKO of Julio Valdez. Tim Ryan describes the end of that bout.
Round 10 with Valdez backing up and looking wobbly. Well, we had the scorecard fairly close in our view coming into this round. Mancini, right uppercut, and down he goes. Hurt him with a left hand. And then as Valdez tried to escape, a right uppercut sent him to the deck. The crowd is on its feet at the Sands Hotel here in Atlantic City. He was up by the 10 count, and referee Rudy Battle has stopped the fight.
Alain Prost of France wheeled his turbocharged Renault to a victory in the South African Grand Prix today. Carlos Reutemann of Argentina was second, and Niki Lauda, who's making a comeback, finished fourth. And Mike, in the National Hockey League this afternoon, Boston beat Washington 3-1, and Los Angeles and Colorado battled to a 3-3 tie.
And who are you for in the Super Bowl?
I'm going against the grain. I'm going to go with Cincinnati by 3 points.
Yeah, I think it's about right. I would agree 3-4, maybe 5 points.
Most people like the 49ers, I think.
Right. How about you, Ed?
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, too? Okay.
Sure.
There we have it. We're unanimous. That wraps up this edition of the 6 p.m. report.
Thank you for joining us. Good night.